Hello, welcome to yet another Walkie Talkie video. I think this might be the 24th video I've done, and yeah, it's Halloween, so I thought it would be fitting to talk about some of the spooky, scary video games that I like. Now, I do like the survival horror genre. I think being put into a scary, spooky situation is a lot of fun. There's some though that I do find can get a little bit tedious sometimes, but for the most part they are fun. I think knowing that you can't just shoot your way out of a situation is always an interesting challenge gaming wise, such as also a shopping cart being randomly here. Oh well, and how long that'll be there for. But yeah, a lot of people will have the favourites: Resident Evil, Silent Hill. These are all games I love, by the way, as well. You can go to the likes of Alone in the Dark, go further back. That was a great game. Some of the ones that have come after have been a bit up and down, but a lot of people cite that as being one of the original survival horror games from back in the day. I can go a bit further back than that. There were certain games from the past that I had on the Commodore 64. One in particular called Scarabaeus, where you were essentially, it was a 3D game. It's actually a first-person game, incredibly enough. And you were sort of going around, I guess it was like an Egyptian pyramid, I suppose. And you were being chased by like giant spiders and like this weird ghostly thing. I can't remember what the hell it was called. But even though it was very primitive, very chunky graphics, it was a real-time first-person game. You didn't input and then wait. You were running around this maze and you had to avoid these things. You had to flip, I think you had to pick things up and flip switches. It's been a hell of a long time since I played it. You had to solve these puzzles and then you would descend down to like the next levels and stuff like that. It was very, very atmospheric. It was very scary and very challenging. And I liked it a lot. It was really good. And when people talk about first-person games and survival horror games, that never gets mentioned. Never gets mentioned. But I'm pretty sure there'll be videos up of it on YouTube. They're well worth checking out. See what it was like all the way back in the 80s. I think you could also say that there was stuff like 3D Monster Maze as well. And yeah, they were pretty cool. Now today I'm going to do something a little bit different. I just want to see where this, well, where a certain path might lead to. I think, actually I actually do have a suspicion where that leads. Yeah, I think we'll just stick with the park today. It's probably be better if I do a reconnaissance of that before I actually go down there. So the thing is, the park's been getting really busy. I guess it's because it's a holiday, but I think that just leads to houses down there. Yeah, we'll stick to the park then, and I'll see you there. I will go this way, I think, to start. Do it a little bit different, I think. So I did go down that other lane that was opposite where I normally shut off my footage, and there was not much there, to be honest. So I'll stick to this place for now. I think that was more like the back of people's houses, and like a place where people who live there park the cars. It wasn't much. It wasn't like the rest of the lane. There was cars and stuff going up and down there. There was people parking up and what have you. So yeah, it's like the access to the back of the houses over in that area, and I guess where they park the cars. And there was like a little playground there and what have you. So yeah, it wasn't much, to be perfectly honest. So anyway, back onto the topic on this Halloween, which of course is spooky games. So I already mentioned about Scarabeus on the Commodore 64, which I would say was probably, well, it was either that or there was a game called Escape, which was like a top-down maze where you were being chased by dinosaurs and you had to escape the maze without getting caught. That was a fun little game. Again, very few people seem to mention it. I don't think it was a massively popular game, but I think that was from like the early days of the C64. I know when you got caught by a dinosaur, it would cut to like a static screen of a T-Rex roaring at you. It was just a static screen, it wasn't animated. There's a little bird. All right. Yeah, just a static screen of a T-Rex. What was funny was no matter which dinosaur caught you, because there was all different ones in the maze, it was always the T-Rex. So even if a Triceratops got you, it would show you the picture of the T-Rex rather than a picture of a Triceratops. But it was a fun little game. You had to get yourself through the maze in and out. I say Scarabeus was the first person shooter, so I suppose technically, not a first person shooter, first person perspective. So I suppose technically you could argue that, well, certainly from the perspective of Scarabeus, they were my first encounters with survival horror video games. And I say they were fun. They were good. I think Scarabeus used to be a bit more scary because it was first person. And I'd not really encountered anything like that at the time. You know, it was incredible really what those old 8-bit computers could do. But rather, I think what the developers of the day were able to do. I mean, these were very small teams, and quite often they were just one person. But often they were small teams. If you had more than 5 people working on one game, even what we would call AAA games, that would be actually quite a rarity. So what they achieved with those games was actually nothing short of remarkable, given the limitations of the hardware back then. So yeah, and then of course everything kind of went, with the 16-bit generation, everything was like platformers and scrolling shooters really, which back then they didn't really lend themselves to survival horror games, in all fairness. I mean, there were horror games, like there was like some Splatterhouse, but I mean it was action, it wasn't survival horror, it was just a horror themed beat 'em up. I remember the Dracula game had on the Mega Drive that was based on the movie, and again it was a bit like a Castlevania. They were platform action games. Castlevania was a platform action game that was horror themed. Could you call it survival horror? Not really. I mean, you were able to beat up all of the creatures in the game, and you had boss battles. You picked up weapons and powered them up. I wouldn't say there was a scarcity of power-ups in the game. Where do you draw the line with these things, really? I suppose it's down to the individual. I just wouldn't classify them as that. And then, of course, you had the Alone in the Dark games. Now, that came out on PC, I think, before it came to consoles. Now, in the early 90s, I wasn't gaming on the PC. I had a Commodore Amiga. I think it did come out for that, but that wasn't really my thing back then, to be honest. I wanted to blow things up. And it wasn't until Resident Evil come out on the PlayStation that I actually started to have an interest in survival horror. Now, I remember when that come out, the reviews were fantastic, and the concept of survival horror was entirely new to me, because they never called it that. It was Scarabeus and all that. They didn't call it survival horror. That really wasn't a phrase that had been coined back then. So for me, when Resident Evil come out, I was totally out of the loop with that type of game. As I say, I'd not played Alone in the Dark. It had got these fantastic reviews. Everyone's saying what a brilliant game it was. And I remember getting it. And I just thought at first I'd be running around blowing the heads off zombies. So when I started the game, and I chose Chris Redfield. Don't know why I'm stumbling over my words there, but anyway, that's who I chose to play. I was like, where are the guns? And then when I did get a gun, it was like, where's the ammo? After I took about 3 zombies down, I had no ammo left, and I'm like, oh, this sucks. I was like, what the hell are people going on about? This being this wonderful, great game. I was like, it sucks. I'm stuck with a knife now that does nothing. Does, next to 0 damage. And of course it was because it was an entirely different way of playing games. And I hadn't familiarised myself with it. And so eventually I sort of like got it. Okay, this isn't a shooter. This is a puzzle game. You know, I've got to solve puzzles and survive here. That's what I've got to do. Going around and blowing things away unnecessarily isn't the way forward. So I changed my approach to playing the game and then started to enjoy it a lot more. I started to really get into it and sort of exploring the mansion, and it started to become fun. You know, I started to get really into it, the tenseness of it, the atmosphere, just immersing myself into that atmosphere, and I loved it. You know, the infamous scene that got everybody, with the dogs jumping through the window towards the start of the game, yeah, that got me as well. Because, say, things like that weren't common. They weren't commonplace in games. Jump scares were, how did you do a jump scare? You know, back in the day, I mean, Doom, I suppose, with the monster closets, but, you know, the monster pop out and you blow it away. What do you do when the monster pops out and you don't have the weapons or the ammo to blow it away, and you got to do a runner? That's a totally different game mechanic. It's entirely different. But it was great fun. And of course I was all over Resident Evil 2 when that came out. Absolutely loved that game. We've got the two campaigns on the disc. 2 discs, 2 different campaigns. And then again, you know, Resident Evil 3 with a nemesis chasing you. That was really tense, but I loved it. And then with Resident Evil 4, they changed things up. That went more over the shoulder perspective, and it became a bit more action orientated, and I didn't so much mind that at the time. I think the series needed freshening up. It had 3 games, all with a sort of fixed camera perspective, so it needed a freshening up a bit. And the systems that were out then were capable of more. You know, Code Veronica showed that. And then obviously with Resident Evil 4, it took it even further. And it was great. It was such a great game. But then Resident Evil 5, I think it took a bit of a nosedive. That just became more of a third-person shooter. I think they'd seen the success of the likes of Gears of War, and they kind of wanted to make Resident Evil a little bit more like that, and it spoilt it for me. And the same with Resident Evil 6. It was more of the same, you know, running around shooting things. Not a massive fan of it. It didn't do either the horror, the survival horror, or the shooting. It didn't really do great with either. It sort of fell between those 2 stools, and the game was very, very good, but it didn't excel in any area. And I was a bit, During that period of time, another game came out on PlayStation, which was Silent Hill, and that was outstanding. There's the Magpie Boys. That was outstanding. So tense. If you had the DualShock controller, when your health started to run low, it would vibrate, imitating your heartbeat. There's such wonderful immersiveness back then. It was great. And then, you know, Silent Hill 2, it's fair to say, I think is a legendary game. You know, you get those games in a particular genre that are just so good. So good. And Silent Hill 2 was such as one of those games. Absolutely love that game. Really tense. It sort of went back to the more survival horror style. Limited ammo, puzzles to solve. Feeling you were getting into situations that using weapons wasn't gonna work. It wasn't gonna help that much. And it was great. It was such a great game. And then Resident Evil made a comeback. It did something that took people back a bit, I think, at the time. It went first person with Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. But it took away it sort of took a step back, from the shooting action. And although there was shooting in the game, it was more restrained, much more like the original games, but with a first-person perspective. And it was great. I love it. I think it was a brilliant game. And that's how it's been now, you know, coming forward into bang up to date, the new Resident Evil games. I'm looking forward to the new one that's coming out. But there was a lot. Survival horror became quite the genre. And then it sort of went away. People stopped making scary games for a while. I remember, like, the thing that was coming out of companies like Konami, of course, who were the publishers of Silent Hill, was that people don't play these games anymore, which was a nonsense. And I think what was the turnaround was the advent of live streaming. People, indie companies came in and filled the void. You got games like Outlast, for example, really good, really scary. Classic survival horror game. You can't even shoot anyone in that game. You're running and hiding. And people like watching other people get scared. And those games became really popular in the community, in the streaming community, in the gaming community. And I think there was a realization that these companies had, they completely messed up. They were listening to marketing people who don't really understand the market. They look at something that doesn't sell and it never occurs to them it might not sell because it's not very good, not because that genre isn't popular anymore. I think they just look at statistics and think that gamers are just mindless automatons that will play anything, which is not the case. And so there was that realization that not only were these streams popular, but it were getting that popular that people were able to make a living off streaming these games. And in addition to that, of course, those games became popular, and people were going and buying them. People were saying, "Oh, I want to play that," because we do like being scared. It's a very primal feeling. It kicks the adrenaline in, the fight or flight. It's that sensation, that adrenaline rush. So people do instinctively like it, ultimately. You know, not necessarily through the actions of playing survival horror games. I'm not suggesting that, well, everybody really secretly loves them, because there are those that don't. But there are things which give you that rush. Some people, it might be getting a kill streak in Call of Duty, or, you know, scoring great goals in FIFA or touchdowns in Madden. But for others, that feeling, that fear, is the ultimate rush. And those games provided that. And so when people were seeing people playing these games, these survival horror games, and they were getting into those survival horror games, they were successful in terms of increasing game sales. And I think there was that realization from the likes of Capcom and Konami that they'd made a bit of a boo-boo. But Konami had to carry on, you know, getting the silliness out of their system. They commissioned Hideo Kojima to do a new Silent Hill game. And that was going to be done alongside the actor Norman Reedus, who was famous for playing Daryl Dixon in The Walking Dead. And that was going to be called Silent Hills. And they came out with a sort of proof of concept interactive trailer called PT. Now, PT proved to be enormously popular. And it was very simple. You were just going around inside of a house, down a corridor, going in a handful of rooms off this corridor. And every time you did it, every time you completed a circuit, it reset and something different would happen. Simple game. Not even a full game. Just a concept. And it was enormously popular. Then Konami did a Konami, and they cancelled Silent Hills. And then they removed PT from the store. I think it was on PlayStation. And so you couldn't download it anymore. So if you had it and you deleted it from your life, you know, deleted the game, you couldn't re-download it even. And incredibly enough, people who still had it installed on their PlayStation were selling those PlayStations on eBay, and they were going for a considerable amount of money just to play a demo. Not a full game, just a demo. People are actually buying the console, paying way over the odds for the console, literally so they could play the demo of PT. If that obviously woke somebody up at Konami out of the coma that they were in when it come to this, and so they then reactivated the Silent Hill franchise, and now we've seen them actually invest quite heavily. Silent Hill 2 got a remake. They come out with an interactive television series, and the original Silent Hill has now been commissioned for a remake, and Silent Hill F has recently been released. I've not actually played that yet, I've not got that yet. So yeah, they've gone from a famine almost to a feast. And Capcom woke up a bit quicker than Konami, and they did remakes of Resident Evil 2, 3 and 4, which are fantastic. You know, they didn't just remaster, they remade. And they actually moved the perspective. They did away with the fixed camera, isometric perspective of the first of Resident Evil 2 and 3 and did over the shoulder. So they brought it into line with Resident Evil 4. Got a leaf stuck to me. Yeah, they brought it in line with Resident Evil 4. And it's superb. They're superb. The only thing I would say with Resident Evil 3, it's very short. It feels a lot shorter than the actual Resident Evil 3. But what's there is outstanding. It's really good. But it just feels truncated, especially compared to Resident Evil 2. And then, as I say, they did newer Resident Evil games, which were first person. And just great. Just very well done, well put together games. I enjoy them immensely. They're wonderful games to play. Weirdly quiet around here today. I can only see one or two other people. Yesterday it was quite busy. Maybe people are hiding. Well, it is daytime, so not quite spooky time yet. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the remake of the original Silent Hill. That's long been overdue, that's always sort of been, whenever anybody's done a remaster or remake, it seems to get ignored in the Silent Hill series. I think Konami could do a lot more. But yeah. But yes, it is a genre I do enjoy. And it goes to show sometimes that just persevering with something that you might not particularly think you're going to like, giving it a chance and learning the game, can reap some pretty nice rewards. It's quite eerie how quiet it's been on this walk. I don't think I've ever known it be as quiet as this. And I'm out at the normal time. So, but yeah, that was pretty much it. I just wanted to do a little chat about the spooky games that I've played and enjoyed down the years and will continue to enjoy. I like going back and playing some of them again, you know, see what they're like in a modern day. Sometimes you do forget things that happen. You remember the main jump scares, but then the smaller ones that you know didn't stand out as much back in the day, they get you. You're like, oh Jesus, I forgot about that. So yeah, replayability is also a good thing as well, especially these days as they tend to do multiple endings to things. I know there was multiple endings in the Silent Hill games, some in the Resident Evil, you know, depending on your performance in the game, things that you might find. So replayability is always a good thing. So yeah, it's They're good. Good. Fun to be scared every now and then. So, I think that's it. I did, because I did that detour that I didn't film walking, I have done quite a bit of walking that I didn't get onto camera today. So I'm starting to feel a little bit in my legs now because I went down that lane. I'm starting to feel it. I want to get back in, upload the last. Oh yeah, Fears to Fathom. That's what I've been playing this Halloween. They're okay. They're pretty good. I mean, they're just cheap, episodic games. They last about a couple of hours max. The only criticism I have is they're very formulaic. Everything sort of culminates in an ending where you have to hide and run. And unfortunately, the game engine isn't the best for that. And the last one that I've done, as you'll see when I upload it, I couldn't get the good ending, just because of the fact that you're supposed to sprint upstairs and the engine's too janky, and this guy can catch you from like 10 feet away. So in the end I was like, well, I'm going to be here all night doing this, and you have to keep repeating the same section over and over again, which isn't particularly interesting for people to watch. And when you do complete the game, it's just some text. That's all it is. And then these people suddenly appeared. Must have popped up out of the ground like the undead. Literally, as I went around the corner before, there was nobody in here, and now there's a few. So yeah, stick there. So yeah, that'll probably do for it. As I say, I'll get that. Then I'll be back onto the Doom playthroughs, getting them uploaded. I'll get this video edited and uploaded. Actually, I don't think there's that much editing to do in this one. So if you're doing anything this Halloween, have fun, and as always, be safe. Enjoy your scares and enjoy whatever you get into. And as I say, yeah, I'll be back on my channel with after I've uploaded. I think it's Woodbury Getaway. I'll be back uploading the Doom 3 stuff. Once I've done that, then I'll be back on to hopefully trying to finish the rest of the Doom playthrough with the other games and bring that up to date. Trying to think of anything else really. I'll start walking back around a bit, I think. So I'm trying to think of anything else, and I can't at this moment. I think I've covered everything. As always, with these videos, when I do talk about games, it's stuff I've played. I don't really talk about stuff that I haven't played, because I haven't played them, so I've got no frame of reference. I have played the Alone in the Dark games years later. I just didn't play them in the day, so their impact of them being amongst the first of that type of game, I didn't have that. That was lost on me because I'd already played Resident Evil and Silent Hill. So that's why I didn't really go into much depth with them. I think other people can do a better job that played them back in the day and remember, the impact of that type of thing. Well, for me, no. So yeah, I'll call it there. Thanks for watching, and I will see you probably on Sunday, the Sunday stroll. So I'll catch you later.